Hello! On this video we will start to review the material for our module on the digestive system. We will start by looking a little of the general concepts, such as the structure of the alimentary canal, and then move on to review the anatomy and physiology following the passage of the food throughout the digestive tract. I wanted to start with a very fundamental question though. What are the general main functions of the digestive system? What are we trying to achieve, and how do we achieve that? Well, I guess that we end up again with this formula that we saw earlier in our course. This slide, of course, shows nicely the interlinking functions of the digestive, respiratory, and urinary systems. And why not adding the vascular system to it too when it comes to the transportation media? So what we see here is, of course, sugar such as glucose molecule in this example being converted into energy shown as ATP. So that is really what our body does. But let's consider a little more about what really is needed to make this happen and what else we need to take into account. And when we do, we end up with 4 main points. So firstly, the digestive system serves for the purpose that we need to get food into the body. So those sugars and nutrients that we use for energy and building materials, and which originate from outside world, we need to get them inside our body, inside our digestive tract. Then, once inside our digestive tract, we need to break them apart so that they are small enough to cross the layers that separates the digestive system's contents from the rest of the body. And in this case, so that the molecules that we break the food into are small enough to make their way into the bloodstream within the blood vessels. So food that we take in is made of 2 big molecules for this to happen. And remember, we learned back in the day that when a larger molecule broke down into smaller components, some energy that was stored in this larger molecule that was released in this process. And the 4th function, then we have the remaining non-digestible part of what we took into the body in the first place. We must get rid of it. And this as well has an important role. We will discuss it a little later. So there we have our 4 functions of the digestive system. And when we discuss this process, there are 2 terms that become especially important. So let's have a look at those. And those 2 terms for us to consider, as they are especially important, summarize the 2 key processes that happen. These terms are digestion and absorption. So digestion refers to the process where we break down the complex food molecules, which are too large for us to use as they are, into smaller molecules. And absorption is then when these smaller molecules are now small enough to be able to pass the membranes, so that they are actually entering the body's vascular or lymphatic system. So now they really are inside the body. So if you are clear of these 2 terms, we are in a great place to continue. Next, I want us to talk a little about the 2 types of movements that can happen in the digestive system. The first one that we are going to address is peristalsis. In this, we have a wave-like movement of the muscles in the alimentary canal, which results in the food moving onward along the tube. The second, instead, is the segmentation. In this, we are just mixing and potentially breaking apart the food bolus inside the tube, not really moving it to any direction as such. Now that we have our basics covered, let's have a look at the digestive tract as a whole. So, digestive tract is really about 8 meters long tube that is continuous, at certain parts thicker and at others thinner, but it starts at one end and opens at another, so a continuous structure. And then we have, of course, the accessory organs that help its function along the way. What's interesting to me is that all of this tube throughout the system has some similar characteristics, no matter where we are at there are always 4 layers of the wall of the tract there. And we will discuss these 4 layers next. As a side note, I want to clarify that the term lumen refers to the inner part of the tube. So we will cover these layers in an order of from the most inner to the most outer. And sometimes you might see that these layers are also referred as tunics. Don't let that throw you off if you see that convention being used. What we are going to do is to review each of these layers, so why don't we get started right away with the mucosal layer. This is the layer that is in the closest contact with the center of the digestive tube's tract. And because the food and material moves directly against it, it has a role of protecting the other layers that follow, as well as secreting whatever needs to be secreted at different parts of the tract, as well as, of course, facilitating the absorption at parts where this happens. The next layer is submucosa, and as the name suggests, it's below the mucosa. This layer is rich with glands, blood vessels, and nerves. So all about regulating the digestion. After that, moving outwards, we have muscular layers. The muscle that we see here is going to be smooth muscle. Remember it from our revision of the muscle types earlier. If not, there is going to be a link at the end of this video. And notice that we typically have circular and longitudinal muscles, with the circular being inner and longitudinal outer. So movements on both directions are possible. And we find a special fiber direction at the stomach, and this is oblique fibers. We will address it a little later. Finally, the outermost layer is the serosa. This is connective tissue that anchors the alimentary canal to its place. Now, there are a few more things that I want to mention. And the first one of these that I do want to talk about is the peritoneum. This is a serous membrane that lines the abdominal cavity. And you might ask its function, right? Well, peritoneum covers the structures and anchors them within the abdominal cavity. And it generates compartments within there. This is especially useful in ensuring that any infection that may be with one part does not get to spread to other parts. And what I want to highlight here is that we often discuss about structures in relation to their location regarding the peritoneum. So we can have retroperitoneal structures. These are behind the peritoneum, like kidneys. And intraperitoneal structures are within it. And then, for example, subperitoneal structures would be below it. Think of a bladder as an example. One part that is very striking if you ever do dissections is the greater omentum. It covers much of the abdominal cavity, pretty much as one of the first structures that you will see. Now, let's look at another important aspect. I want to say a few words about the innervation, and by this I mean the nervous control of the digestive tract. And you might remember the 2 branches of the autonomic nervous system. You recall the sympathetic branch as all about fight or flight responses. So in these, the digestion would go down. It is not essential for the immediate survival. So what drives a digestive system to function faster is going to be the parasympathetic branch, right? The last thing that I want to mention in this video is that there is a very rich blood supply to the intestines. And if you think about it, it makes sense. The ultimate goal of the intestines is to extract nutrients and energy from the food. And that's just what happens. And to catch the nutrients and energy, we need rich blood supply to the area. And this blood, more or less, all gets directed first to the liver. Why? Well, it is within the liver where much of these gets stored before the blood gets distributed to the rest of the body. Otherwise, the body is greedy. It would burn off that energy without a good strategic use of it. So, that concludes our introductory video to the digestive system. Next, we will start to review the system, one part at a time, and this foundation will give us a good basis to do so. So, I will see you in the next video.